Hello and welcome back to the Gaming Dave. Now, I don't know if you know this, but Hearthstone has a new expansion due out on Monday. So, to kind of address that, I have reviewed every single card that has come out. I'm doing this as quick and as brief and compressed as possible, so we're going to try and get through these in one video. Now, due to inferior editing software, I'm going to put a link down in the description to the guide that I am using, which has all the cards so you can see the cards that I'm reviewing as I'm reviewing them. Okay, let's go. We're going to start off with the class cards and starting off with Druid. First off, we have the legendary Aviana, a 9 mana 5/5, so pretty poor stats, and it has a minions. Your minions cost 1. This has crazy ramp value and is best put behind a taunt wall, otherwise it will die pretty quickly. Next off, we have the spell Astral Communication, of 4 mana, and the effect is gain 10 mana crystals but discards your entire hand. This has crazier ramp value, but be careful with regards of what you're discarding. You're going to want to play this pretty quickly, but just you could lose some great value if you play it. Next card is Mulch, a 3 mana spell. Destroy a minion, but you add a random minion to your opponent's hand. In my eyes, this is a bad card. The potential advantage to your opponent is not worth playing it. Next up, we have Knight of the Wild, a 7 mana 6/6. Whenever you summon a beast, reduce the cost of this card by 1. Potential for value in Beast Druid, which saw a little bit of play around goblins versus gnomes. Next up, we have Savage Combatant, a 4 mana 5/4 beast with the Inspire mechanic, which triggers every time you use your hero power. This gives your hero +2 attack this turn. Potential anti-aggro for hero power for good early game control. Darnassus Aspirant, 2 mana 2/3 battle cry, gain an empty mana crystal, but it has a death rattle of losing a mana crystal. This is not really a great card, as the effect is short and isn't really worth it. Next up, we have the Wild Walker, a 4 mana 4/4 with a battle cry, give a friendly beast +3 health. This has more potential towards Beast Druid, but I'm slightly unsure on the stat line. Next up, we have Druid of the Saber, a 2 mana 2/1, and it has a choose of charge or +1/+1 and stealth. Interesting. Most likely to choose the buff, and it's weirdly aggressive for a Druid card. Next up, we have Living Root, a 1 mana spell, which is choose deal 2 damage or summon 2 1/1 saplings. Potentially good anti-aggro and scales pretty well with spell damage. Next up, we have the Hunter class, and first I'm going to start off with Acid Maw, a 7 mana 4/2 beast. So this has an awful stat line. Whenever another minion takes damage, destroy it. In my eyes, this costs too much and is a bad card. However, some people have shown that it can work pretty well with the spell Unleash the Hounds, which spawns a hound, 1/1 hound with charge for each minion your opponent has. And it can cause a really slow but effective board clear. So we'll see how that gets played later on. Dreadscale is a 3 mana 4/2, which is a much better stat line, and at the end of your turn deal 1 damage to all other minions. Not that great as it plays into the hands of Enrage and Patron Warrior, and can also just clear your own board, which you really don't want. Next up, we have Stable Master, another 3 mana 4/2 with a battle cry, give a friendly beast immune this turn. Another card that I don't really think is that great, as immune is not that useful an effect, especially only for 1 turn. Next up, we have Lock and Load, a 2 mana spell, which is each time you cast a spell this turn, add a random hunter card to your hand. Potential for crazy hunter combos, but only really good in the late game. Ball of Spiders for 6 mana, which is summon 3 1/1 web spinners, which its death rattle will give you a random beast added to your hand. For the cost, this isn't great value. If the card was a little bit cheaper, then maybe it might see a bit more play. Next up, we have the Ram Wrangler, 5 mana 3/3 with a battle cry. If you have a beast, summon another random beast. Now, this is also another really interesting card, and I'm saying unsure about it. It has Grim Patron stat lines with a 5 mana 3/3, and a very strong RNG factors. This could work really well for you, or this could just not work well for you at all. Next up, we have Power Shot, 3 mana, which deals 2 damage to a minion and the minions next to it. This is a very strong anti-aggro card, and scales pretty well with spell damage. Next up, we have the King's Elk, a 2 mana 3/2 beast with a battle cry, reveal a minion in each deck, which is a new mechanic, and if yours costs more, draw it. It doesn't really fit with the Hunter playstyle of aggro and mid-range, but we'll see if this gets used at all. Bear Trap is the new secret, 2 mana. After your hero is attacked, summon a 3/3 bear with Taunt. Now this has potentially great value and is very strong for anti-aggro. Next up, we have the Brave Hunter, which, as you can see from the picture, if you're looking at the guide, is just a mimicking of Disney's Brave. This is a 1 mana 2/1 with another Inspire mechanic. If your hand is empty, deal 2 damage to the enemy hero. Now, this is a very strong aggro card that plays right into the hands of Face Hunter. However, its 1 health makes it very easy to kill and easily a high priority target. Moving on to Mage, and first off we have Ronan, an 8 mana 7/7, with a death rattle of add 3 copies of Arcane Missiles, which deals 3 damage randomly split among your enemies, to your hand. An odd death rattle that could lead to some fun combos and good board clears. It's a good target for the big game hunter that takes out any minion above 7 attack, but stats are okay. Kuldara Drake is a new dragon at 6 mana, for 6/6. You can use your any number of times. An interesting idea that will synergize well with some of the other cards in this expansion. Arcane Blast for 1 mana will deal 2 damage to a minion. This spell gets double bonus from spell damage. Very strong potential, good anti-aggro, and scales great with spell damage. Effigy is the new mage secret at 3 mana. When a friendly minion dies, summon a random minion with the same cost. This is great for control mage and creates some really funny and interesting plays. Next up, we have a new form on Polymorph called Polymorph Boar for 3 mana, which transforms a minion into a 4/2 boar with charge. Now, in my eyes, this is great with mirror images and desperation plays for use on your own minions, but if you have something really big, could be used to kind of shrink it down a bit. Next up, we have Fallen Hero, 2 mana 3/2 that your hero power deals 1 extra damage. Adds to Control Mage and the validity of the hero power, stats match the cost, but this card will not last in the field. Next up, we have Flamelance for 5 mana, which deals 8 damage to a minion. It's kind of just the Mage Assassinate, but won't really always work. It's questionable removal at best to deal, and won't deal with all threats. Consider Ramp Druid with the 5/10 Ancient of War. Next up, we have the Dalaran Aspirant, a 4 mana 3/5, which Inspire gains spell damage +1. Good stats for giving potential longevity and adds the legitimacy of Spell Power Mage, which is something we don't really see that often. And finally, we have Spellslinger, a 3 mana 3/4 with a battle cry, add a random spell to each player's hand. This card has great potential in any mage deck, however, the value that could be given to your opponent could be too great a risk to use. Now let's move on to Paladin, first starting off with Eardrick the Pure, a 7 mana 3/7 with a battle cry of change all enemy minions attack to 1. This is a really weak stat line, except for kind of anti-aggro. However, the effect could give it some value against control decks that use high power minions. Next up, we have the Mysterious Challenger, a 6 mana 6/6 with a battle cry. Put one of each secret from your deck into the battlefield. Potential good value depending on the secrets that you run in your deck, with like okay stats. Next up, we have Enter the Colosseum, destroy all minions except each player's highest attack minion. Great anti-aggro card and encourages control Paladin, which is always a good thing to see. Next up, we have the Tuskar Jouster, 5 mana 5/5 with a battle cry, reveal a minion in each deck. If yours costs more, restore 7 health to your hero. This is great for control with reasonable stats and encourages the use of weapons in early game trading because you can just get that health back. Next up, we have the Argent Lance, a new weapon, a 2 mana 2 attack with 2 durability with a battle cry, reveal a minion in each deck. If yours costs more, gains +1 durability. It's a great early game weapon for control. Next up, we have Competitive Spirit, which is the new secret. When your turn starts, give your minions +1/+1. The only way to play around this is with Control or Kazan Mystic. Good secret for early game control. Next up, we have the Murloc Knight, a 4 mana 3/4 Murloc with an Inspire of summon a random Murloc. Now, of course, a new Murloc card. I mean, what's not to love with that? Potentially a lot of fun like most Murlocs. The use of Inspire could make this a slow card though, but if we see Paladin Murloc, I'm not going to complain. Next up, we have the Warhorse Trainer, a 3 mana 2/4. Your Silverhand recruits have +1 attack. Good card for the current mid-range Paladin, and stats give it early game longevity. Next up, we have Seal of Champions, a 3 mana and gives a minion +3 attack and Divine Shield. The stats don't work for this card. Given that a Divine Shield spell costs 1 mana, as does a spell for +3 attack. Initial impressions for this card aren't good. Now let's move on to Priest and start with Confessor Peltress, a 7 mana 5/4 with an Inspire of summon a random legendary minion. This is a great late game card with amazing potential value. However, the weak stats mean it might only spawn 1 legendary minion before it gets killed, and in turn making this a 9 mana card, which is not something that you want. Next up, we have a Shadow Fiend, 3/3 for 3. Whenever you draw a card, reduce its cost by 1. This is great potential synergy with the Northshire Cleric that tends to draw a lot of cards, and producing a Thorson effect, which is always really cool. Confuse for 2 mana, swap the attack and health of all minions. This is a supercharged Crazed Alchemist without the body. Great board clear potential, but could be tricky to use though, so be careful. Next up, we have Spawn of Shadows, a 4 mana 5/4 with Inspire of deal 4 damage to each hero. This has great potential for Aggro Priest, however self-damage means it won't work well with the Shadow Priests that already would like to focus on just dealing more damage. Next up, we have Convert, a 2 mana spell that puts a copy of an enemy minion into your hand. This is great in the late games, also allows for the use of Battle Cry, so great potential here. Next up, we have the Rimrist Agent, 2 mana 1/4 with a Battle Cry. If you're holding a dragon, gain +1 attack and Taunt. A great card, and while Dragon Synergy has been weak even with the Blackrock expansion, this is a good card to maybe see more dragons being used in Priest. Next up we have the Holy Champion, a 4 mana 3/5. Whenever a character is healed, gain +2 attack. This is basically the next level Lightworn with great base stats, so overall a great card. And finally, for Priest we have Power Word Glory, a 1 mana spell which you choose a minion whenever it attacks, restore 4 health to your hero. Great with Wind Fury or late game cards that will stay on the board for quite a while. And actually, finally, missing one more, Flash Heal, restore 5 health. You can't really fault this card. It's good for healing your face, and it's good for healing minions, so what's not to love with it? Next up we have Rogue, and we'll start off with Anubarak, 9 mana 8/4 with a Death Rattle. Turn this to your hand and summon a 4/4 Nerubian. Next up we have Poisoned Blade, a new weapon at 4 mana with a 1 attack, 3 durability. Your hero power gives this weapon +1 attack instead of replacing it. Potentially a slow weapon or one that you'll want to hold on to for acceleration, but this does make it super susceptible to more than any other weapon to the likes of Harrison Jones, which destroys your weapon and draws cards depending on its durability, or the Acidic Swamp Boost that just destroys your weapon. Next up we have Beneath the Grounds, a 3 mana spell that shuffles 3 ambushes into your opponent's deck. This is a token spell. When drawn, you summon a 4/4 Nerubian. More mill rogue value that can also steal cards from that also involve your opponent having to draw more cards. Nerubians are good cards in mid-range and anti-aggro, so this is a really good card. Shade Dealeth, 3 mana 4/3 with a battle cry. If you have a pirate, gain +1/+1. Good card for stats, but rarity of pirate synergy makes this unlikely to see much use. Next up we have Burgle, a 3 mana spell that adds 2 random class cards to your hand from your opponent's class. Potential crazy value and essentially a more fun thought steal because you aren't limited by what your opponent put in their deck. Next up we have Cutpurse, a 2 mana 2/2. Whenever this minion attacks a hero, add the coin to your hand. Potential early game aggro value, but low health would make it an easy target, especially with the fact that it would be giving you a coin every time it attacks your opponent directly. Next up we have the Shadowpan Rider, 5 mana 3/7 with a combo of gain +3 attack. Now the combo mechanic works if you've played a card previously in the turn, and as I put in my notes here, this card is fantastic. I rate 8 out of 8, mate, no hate. This card is seriously fantastic and I absolutely love it. Great stats. Sure, the combo might be tricky, but as a base card, 3/7 is already good value. Next up we have the Undercity Valiant, a 2 mana 3/2 with a combo of deal 1 damage. This is potential good first turn anti-aggro against Lepinomes and other 1 health minions. Other than that, it's kind of a poor card, so be careful with that. Next up we have the Buccaneer, a 1 mana 2/1 pirate. Whenever you equip a weapon, give a +1 attack. Adding potential value to Pirate Weapon Rogue, you're unlikely to see it be used anywhere else in any other kind of rogue decks. Next up we have Shamans, and first off we have the Mistcaller, a 6 mana 4/4 with a battle cry of give all minions in your hand and deck +1/+1. This has absolutely fantastic value if you can get this card out as soon as possible. It's the only way you're going to make it really, really effective. Next up we have the Charged Hammer, a new weapon which is a 4 mana 2 attack 4 durability. The Death Rattle is that your hero power changes to become dealing 2 damage. A great anti-aggro weapon, and the Death Rattle is also very strong for anti-aggro. Next up we have Elemental Destruction, a 3 mana deal 4 to 5 damage to all minions with an overload of 5, which means you have 5 less mana next turn. Holy anti-aggro board clear, Batman. Overload and the fact that it hits all minions does hinder this a little bit, though it could be kind of a good card, I guess. Next up we have the Thunderbluff Valiant, a 5 mana 3/6 with Inspire, giving your totems +2 attack. Good card, and Inspire creates greater totem value, which is something that's kind of been missing recently. Next up we have the Draenei Totem Carver, a 4/4/4, with Battle Cry of gain +1/+1 for each friendly totem. More totem value and synergy. If you don't have any totems, this card is average to weak at best. Next up we have Healing Wave, a 3 mana, restore 7 health. Reveal a minion in each deck, and if yours costs more, restore 14 health instead. This has great value in Control Shaman, especially if you've taken a lot of damage, and it's a fantastic way to turn the game around for very little mana. Next up we have the Tuskar Totemic, a 3 mana 3/2 with a battle cry of summon any random totem. Potentially good value, but stats make this card a little bit questionable if you don't get an ideal totem. Next up we have Ancestral Knowledge, a 2 mana spell which draws 2 cards for overload of 2. The 2-cost overload damages the viability of this card, but it could be kind of good in an aggro situation, or maybe played later in the game if you're a bit, if you don't really have that much of a hand. And finally we have the Totem Golem, a 2 mana 3/4 totem with an overload of 1. This is a great value card, and the overload is not too punishing, so this is likely to see use in maybe aggro Shaman, or kind of just anti-aggro shaman. Next up we have Warlock, starting off with Wilfred Fizzlebang, a 6-mana 4/4. Cards that you draw from your hero power cost 1. Now this card sounds great in theory, but the poor stats make this an easy target, meaning you're unlikely to benefit from the effect. Next up we have Dark Bargain, a 6-mana, destroy 2 random enemy minions and you discard 2 random cards. In my eyes this is not worth it for the discarding, and in my eyes is a bad card. Next up we have Dreadsteed, a 4-mana 1/1 demon with the death rattle of summoning a Dreadsteed. I see no value in this card, and how bad this card is upsets me a little. Next up we have the Void Crusher, 6-mana 5/4 demon with an Inspire of destroy a random minion for each player. Potential against strong control and late game decks, but it is very circumstantial, so I would be careful if you want to use it. Next up we have the Fist of Jaraxxus, a 4-mana spell. Whenever you play or discard this, deal 4 damage to a random enemy. A peculiar card is it's kind of one of the first to have an effect when it's discarded, and an interesting idea. Good for anti-aggro, kind of. Next up we have the Tiny Knight of Evil, a 2-mana 3/2 demon. Whenever you discard a card, gain +1/+1. Another interesting card, and it's unlikely to see use as discarding can be unreliable and you might lose some good value. Next up we have the Fearsome Doomguard, a 7-mana 6/8 demon, a solid card with average stat line and good in most situations. Next up we have the Wrathguard, a 2-mana 4/3 demon, and whenever this minion takes damage, also deal that damage to your hero. A card that makes little sense and probably won't see any play. Next up we have Demon Fuse, a 2-mana, give a demon +3/+3, give your opponent a mana crystal. A very circumstantial card and will unlikely see play due to the benefit it gives, though it could potentially see value in Zoolock, particularly if you're going for an aggressive Zoolock style. And at the end of the classes we have Warrior, first starting off with Varian Rin, a 10-mana 7/7, Battlecry, draw 3 cards. Put any minion you draw directly into the battlefield. This has amazing value, this has amazing RNG, the crazy plays Control Warrior now have access to are absolutely fantastic. Arguably one of my favourites from the whole expansion. Next up we have Sea Reaver, a 6-mana 6/7, when you draw this, deal 1 damage to your minions. Good stats for the cost, and the effect have good synergy with Enrage and Patron Warrior. Next up we have the Magnetor Alpha, a 4-mana 5/3, which also damages the minions next to whomever attacks. A good card against the mid-game and early game. Low health makes this card a little bit of a problem though. Next up we have a new weapon, the King's Defender, a 3-mana 3/2 with a Battle Cry. If you have a minion with Taunt, gain +1 durability. Good for control and anti-aggro. The Battle Cry is a tad circumstantial, so unlikely to see use. Next up we have the Sparring Partner, a 2-mana 3/2 with Taunt and a Battle Cry of give a minion Taunt. Good for stopping Face Hunter, and that's probably about it. Next up we have Alexstrasza's Champion, a 2-mana card at 2/3 stat line with a Battle Cry. If you're holding a dragon, gain +1 attack and charge. This is potentially great for aggro or early control, however the dragon synergy does make it a bit questionable. Next up we have Bash, a 3-mana spell which deals 3 damage and you gain 3 armor as a result. Potentially good anti-aggro and makes you live longer, combating Face Hunter, but overall it's not that great. Next up we have the Orgrimmar Aspirant, a 3-mana 3/3 which gives your weapon +1 attack. Potentially a good card, but I am kind of unsure. It has a decent stat line, but if you don't have a weapon, then it's not really that great. Next up we have Bolster, a 2-mana spell which gives your Taunt minions +2/+2. A very interesting card with the likes of Sparring Partner that I mentioned earlier, and could create some kind of Taunt control deck, which I find very interesting. And now we move on to the 50 neutral cards. So without further ado, let's get going. First off, we'll start off with Ice Howl, a 9-mana 10/10 which has charge and can't attack heroes. This is an absolutely fantastic control card and could work well with Silence to allow for a finisher. Next up we have Sky Captain Krog, a 7-mana 4/6 pirate with charge, which costs 1 less for each friendly pirate. As pirate decks are low cost aggro, this makes a bit of sense and is also kind of a fun card. Next up we have Chillmore, 7-mana 6/6 dragon with a Taunt death rattle. If you're holding a dragon, deal 3 damage to all minions. This is strong anti-aggro death rattle, and the Taunt makes it easy to trigger. However, it's super susceptible to silence. Next up we have Justicar Trueheart, a 6-mana 6/3, which replaces your hero's starting hero power with a better one. This card is hilariously fantastic, the change is permanent and all changes are fantastic. This will likely be in the majority of Grand Tournament decks. Next up we have the Skeleton Knight, a 6-mana 7/4 with Death Rattle, reveal a minion each deck. If yours costs more, return this to your hand. Potential good control, but the poor health makes this card not that great. Next up we have Bolf Ramshield, a 6-mana 3/9. Whenever your hero takes damage, this minion takes it instead. A weird mechanic, but very interesting and good anti-aggro card. Next up we have Nexus Champion Serad at 5-mana 4/5 with an Inspire, add a random spell to your hand. A really good card in my opinion, and a good use of the mechanic and has great potential. Next up we have Gormok the Impaler, a 4/4 for 4 with a Battle Cry. If you have at least 4 of the minions, deal 4 damage. That's a lot of 4s. A great aggro card and anti-aggro card, despite poor to average stats. Next up we have Adis Dark Darkbane, a 3 mana 3/4. Whenever you target this minion with a spell, deal 3 damage to a random enemy. This has great potential on Paladin or Priest and works as an aggro card. Next up we have Fiola Lightbane, another 3 mana 3/4, and whenever you target this minion with a spell, gain Divine Shield. This has potential as an anti-aggro card, but the effect is not that great, though it does have good stats. Next up we have the Frost Giant, a 10 mana 8/8, which costs 1 less for each time you've used your hero power this game. Given the Inspire mechanic that comes with this expansion, this could be a good card, especially in Control Mage. Next up we have Kodo Rider, a 6 mana 3/5, which Inspire summons a 3/5 War Kodo. Unsure on this card, but it does have potential value. Next up we have Grand Crusader, a 6 mana 5/5 with Battlecry, add a random Paladin card to your hand. A potential crazy card that could create some really interesting plays. Next up we have the Sideshow Spell Eater, 6 mana 6/5 with Battlecry, copy your opponent's hero power. Be careful when using this card, but otherwise it has potential crazy fun. Next up we have the Recruiter, a 5 mana 5/4 with an Inspire, add a 2/2 squire to your hand. These squires are rumoured to be 1 mana, causing it to be a potentially interesting anti-aggro card. Next up we have the Twilight Guardian, a 4 mana 2/6 dragon with Battlecry. If you're holding a dragon, gain +1 attack and taunt. Turning this into a 3/6 with taunt if a dragon is in your hand makes it a good mid-game and anti-aggro card. Next up we have the Crowd Favourite, a 4/4 for 4, which whenever you play a minion with Battlecry, gain +1/+1. This sounds good in theory, but probably just won't be played. I'm calling it now. Next up we have the Master of Ceremonies, a 3 mana 4/2 with Battlecry. If you have a minion with spell damage, gain +2/+2. Another card unlikely to see play, as super susceptible to silence, and spell damage is kind of uncommon. Next up we have the Garrison Commander, a 2 mana 2/3, and you can use your hero power twice a turn. A very good card while it's alive, however you are unsure as to how long this card will be alive for. Next up we have Mogul's Champion, a 6 mana 8/5 with a 50% chance to attack the wrong enemy. A hilarious minion, but has poor stats due to its low health. Next up we have the Master Jouster, a 6 mana 5/6 with a Battlecry, reveal a minion in each deck. If yours costs more, gain Taunt and Divine Shield. Like with most cards of this type, works well in decks with late game control. The Armored Warhorse, a 4 mana 5/3 with Beast. With Battlecry, reveal a minion in each deck, and if yours costs more, gain Charge. An okay card that can be used in control to bash down mid-game threats. Next up we have the Light Champion, a 3 mana 4/3 with Battlecry, silence a demon. The focus on demon sounds makes this card too circumstantial to see play. Next up we have the Saboteur, a 3 mana 4/3 with a Battlecry. Your opponent's hero power costs 5 more next turn. Not really a useful Battlecry, as hero powers are generally ineffective, even with the changes that are being made through the likes of Justicar Trueheart and other buffs that are being given. Next up we have the Colosseum Manager, a 3 mana 2/5 with Inspire. Return this minion to your hand. Potentially useful to keep this alive, but unlikely to really see play. Next up we have the Fencing Coach, a 3 mana 2/2 with a Battlecry. The next time you use your hero power, it costs 2 less, essentially making it free. Potentially good card to deal some extra damage or gain an upper hand. Next up we have the Argent Watchman, a 2 mana 2/4 which can't attack, but if you inspire it, it can attack as normal this turn. Potential really good anti-aggro card. Next up we have the Injured Cavaldier, a 1 mana 2/4 with a Battlecry, deal 3 damage to this minion. Similar to the Injured Blade Master, this could be really useful in priest decks. Next up we have the North Sea Kraken, a 9 mana 9/7 with a Battlecry of deal 4 damage. A great card against early and mid game with good stats for the cost if you want to knock over some bigger stuff. Next up is the Captured Jawmonger, a 7 mana 5/9 beast. Its stats balance out, but it is a bit of an odd stat line. Another good anti-aggro card due to its lowish attack and higher health. Next up we have the Clockwork Knight, a 5 mana 5/5 mech with a Battlecry of giving a friendly mech +1/+1. Good mid-game addition to mech decks, as mech decks tend to be very aggressive and peak around 3 or 4 mana. Next up we have Mukla's Champion, a 5 mana 4/3 beast with an Inspire, give your other minions +1/+1. Potentially good in aggro decks, however poor stats mean this card is unlikely to see use. Next up we have the Pit Fighter, a 5 mana 5/6. That's all it has to it, and it's a solid mid-game card with some good stats. Next up we have the Cavaldier Raider, a 5 mana 4/4 with an Inspire, gain +2/+2. In theory making this a 7 mana 6/6, making this a poor card. Next up we have the Frigid Snowball, a 4 mana 2/6 with spell damage +1. An interesting stat line for a 4-drop and kind of a good spell damage card. Next up we have Maiden of the Lake, another 4 mana 2/6, and your hero power costs 1. A good card for this expansion, and while this card lives, a great potential threat and anti-aggro. Next up we have the Refreshment Vendor, 4 mana 3/5 with Battlecry, restore 4 health to your hero. A good card if you have suffered early aggro damage. Next up we have the Tournament Medic, a 4 mana 1/8. And Inspire, restore 2 health to your hero. A weird stat line that works best behind a Taunt Wall or anti-face decks. The Inspire also works well against aggro decks. Next up we have the Evil Heckler, a 4 mana 5/4 with Taunt. It's better than a Booty Bay Bodyguard, which wasn't great, but this card is still kinda mediocre. Next up we have the Dragonhawk Rider, a 3 mana 3/3, which Inspire gains Wind Fury this turn. Potentially a good aggro card, but that's probably has going for it. The Ice Rager, a 3-mana 5/2. Better than the 3-mana 5/1 Magma Rage, which has been in since the start, but this wasn't the solution. Blizzard, why would you make this card? Next up we have the Argent Horse Rider, a 3-mana 2/1 with Charge and Divine Shield. This card isn't good, and that's probably something to do with the stat line. Next up we have the Silent Knight, a 3-mana 2/2 with Stealth and Divine Shield. Potentially an okay anti-aggro card, but unlikely to really see use. Next up we have the Silverhand Regent, a 3-mana 3/3 with Inspire summon a 1/1 Silverhand Recruit. Okay stats for the cost, and Inspire kinda works well in mid-range Paladin. Next up we have the Lance Carrier, a 2-mana 1/2 Battlecry, give friendly minion +2 attack. A good permanent buff for a low-cost minion, though the stats are a little weak. Next up we have the Bone Guard Lieutenant, a 2-mana 3/2 with an Inspire gain +1 health. A potential good snowball card for getting out of control and having early anti-aggro. Next up we have the Flame Juggler, a 2-mana 2/3 with a Battlecry of deal 1 damage to a random enemy. It has good stats for the cost, but has a poor Battlecry and plays right into the hands of Patron Warrior, or just, it doesn't really do enough damage to warrant the attention. Next up we have the Tournament Attendee, a 1-mana 2/1 with Taunt. This is an awful 1-drop. This will not see play at all. Next up we have the Gadgetzan Auctioneer, a 1-mana 1/2 with Battlecry, reveal a minion in each deck, and if yours costs more, gain +1/+1. This is a great card for early control. That's the kind of 1-drop we want to see. And finally we have the Lowly Squire, a 1-mana 1/2 which Inspire gain +1 attack. This is also potentially a good snowball card, but would be hard to pull off. So that was all 132 cards. I'm glad you managed to get this far if you're still watching. It's hard to predict what will happen next in the game when it comes out, what kind of decks you're going to see come through, but there does seem to be a lot of emphasis on putting a stop to overly aggressive decks, and I think that's really refreshing to see. So if you have any thoughts, let me know what you think. I'm the Gaming Dave. I'll see you next time.